Search online for trauma release exercises and you'll find loads of information on how to do it, with pictures and videos of people lying on their backs, tremoring. But there's very little information on what actually happens when you do these exercises, how it affects your sleep, how it affects your day-to-day life, and how long it takes to heal from the process to feel better. I've been doing trauma release exercises for 8 weeks now, and although I have been experiencing some emotional release, sometimes it feels as if I'm never going to heal. And going by online comments I've seen, it sometimes seems that many other people have the same experience. On the other hand, many people do report experiencing benefits from trauma release exercises, also known as TRE. And they say that it did help them to heal from trauma, or just to feel more calm, less stressed. In my case, I just think I have to be patient and keep at it. But I would love to know how long it's going to take. I would just like to know more about how different people experience TRE. In this video, I'm going to talk more about how I've experienced TRE, and not just while I'm doing the exercises, but also in between sessions. So if you're thinking of doing TRE yourself, you might find it helpful to hear about my experiences. And if you've already experienced TRE, it would be great to hear your comments about how it affected you. Last week, I made a video about my experiences doing trauma release exercises, TRE as they're called. The video was completely unplanned, spontaneous, because I just felt that I needed to talk about it, as it was difficult to focus on anything else with all that going on. I have to emphasise that it's the trauma release process that's causing these problems that I've been having, not the actual exercises. The exercises are a tool to help me release the emotional trauma that I've been holding for a long, long time. I have used other tools in the past to help me release trauma, and I'm just finding that trauma release exercises seem to be giving me a particularly strong emotional release at this time. So you might be wondering, what is TRE? Why am I even doing this to myself? TRE is a physical somatic process where certain positions, body positions, are adopted so that the body is encouraged to shake or tremor, and in that way emotions are released. Emotions that have been actually held in the body. The most commonly seen trauma release position is where you lie on your back with your legs apart in the butterfly position, and then you raise your back off the floor slightly. You hold that position for about a minute, and usually that triggers the shaking process. I don't advise anyone to try this on their own, unsupervised, because the process can be very, very powerful. So it's best to work with an experienced practitioner. There are many Reddit forums online where people discuss what can happen when you do trauma release exercises unsupervised. And sometimes it seems the effects can be quite overwhelming and can last for a long time. I've been working with a certified TRE practitioner who does exercises online in groups. I'll put the details in the show notes. We always do warm-up exercises before starting the tremoring process, and she always stresses the importance of taking breaks and never doing TRE for more than 15 minutes at one time. The advice is that if you do TRE on your own, you should do it no more frequently than once every 3 days, and then just keep it to 15 minutes or less. Despite having adhered tightly to those guidelines, I've still had really powerful effects from doing it. It's affected my sleep sometimes. I've felt nauseous, and sometimes I've felt tired for days on end after doing a shaking session. I think you just have to do it step by step and be patient, and to monitor your responses, just to keep tabs on how it's affecting you. And just be aware that the process can be a really powerful one. For some people, they seem to just find it quite relaxing. I've read reports of people who've done it every day and they've been fine. So I think it affects everyone differently. But the fact is that if you've been holding on to repressed emotions for decades, it's never going to be an easy process to release those emotions. That's just the way it is, whichever method you use. And for many people, they don't even realise how much trauma they've been holding on to over the years because it's so buried in the subconscious. And if you do find that you've got a very powerful release of emotions when you start doing TRE, it is possible to work with people, with practitioners on a one-to-one basis. So I'll put the details of some of those in the show notes. Trauma release exercises were developed by Dr. David Berceli in the early 2000s. So they've been around for about 25 years, but that's nothing in scientific terms. It's a really short time. So the process hasn't been extensively studied. And when I looked online, I found it really difficult to find out anything about possible side effects of TRE. And there's also quite a few sensationalist headlines claiming miracle results, but sound, factual answers to many of the questions that I've got are hard to find. Questions like, what percentage of people doing TRE are actually healed from their trauma? Or how long does it take to heal from trauma using TRE? How long on average? Or are particular types of tremoring related to particular types of trauma? I mean, that might seem like an unusual question, but when you start doing this and you see your body going into spasm in different ways, those are the kind of questions that come to mind. I think it's partly because the effects of TRE vary so much according to how much trauma you've experienced, how much you can access that trauma, and also how long that trauma is being repressed for. And, many people do TRE not to release trauma, but just to feel more relaxed generally. And I've seen a couple of posts online from people who said that TRE exercises left them feeling exposed, as if they'd exposed their trauma, but they couldn't get rid of that feeling. So they were walking around feeling spaced out or feeling overwhelmed by trauma, sometimes for weeks on end. I'd love to know whether they found the process healing eventually. So I've been doing the exercises now since the end of August, so it's about 2 months. And it does sometimes feel as if there's no end to the sort of cycle of feeling really tired for a few days and then recovering. I'm sure that it will help in the end, but I think it can be a really difficult process to go through, just because for me it's so tiring. And I have had that experience when I've done other types of exposure therapy, for example. So I don't think it's the TRE itself that's the problem. This is what I'm saying. I just think that this exercise is very powerful and it's a very good way to expose trauma. But then when does the healing actually start to happen? And the other thing is that I've been very careful to pace myself with doing this. So sometimes I've taken a week's break from it. If I've had something on happening that I've had to be focused, I've had to have energy and focus for, I've decided not to do TRE for a week or so. I like to think that I'm getting closer to the deeper layers of trauma. And I'll speak about why I've been so traumatized in a future episode, because that's another subject altogether. But this trauma has been held for a very long time. I do feel that my body, in fact my whole system, is kind of readjusting and realigning. So I think things are happening in a positive way. And I hope that ultimately this process will bring relaxation to some of the parts of me that have been hyper-vigilant for a long time. The initial motivation to start this trauma release process came because of my long-held fear of spiders and spiders' webs. And I'm pretty certain that relates to early trauma. Again, that's something that I'll talk about more in a future episode. The fear doesn't seem to be showing any signs of shifting. But maybe that's because I've been feeling quite emotionally raw. The whole process seems to go in cycles. So hopefully there will be relaxation around it, hopefully soon. And this is one of the questions in my mind about the whole thing. When you first start doing TRE, the effects are usually quite mild. And that was the case with me as well. When I started doing it with the practitioner, my legs were tremoring and it just seemed I was quite bemused by the whole thing. They seemed to just do it on their own. And for the first 2 or 3 sessions, it was just this sort of tremoring in my legs. like a kind of electrical charge. And apparently that's the case for most people. I've been told that tremoring in the legs can often go on for months before tremoring in other parts of the body starts to happen. But with me, it was the third or the fourth session when I started having tremoring from the solar plexus. And it was really strange. It was like my whole body was moving up and down in a kind of undulating way. And my head was actually banging on the floor a bit. Not hard, not sort of harshly, but it was just weird. And I was sort of making weird panting sounds. My breath was coming out really fast, but I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't actually feeling that. It was as if I was a kind of observer watching the whole process. That's been the case with all the tremoring. You just observe what your body's doing. Your body does it. Sometimes when I see films of people tremoring, it looks as if they're actually shaking and doing things. But that's not the case. It's your body doing it. You're not actually making your body do it. It's the strangest feeling. It's like a spasm that gets touched off or triggered by certain parts of the body. So from about 3 or 4 sessions in, I found that the tremoring seemed to be touched off by my solar plexus area. And then I'd go into this kind of undulating thing, which is really, really weird. And then at the end of one of those sessions, I suddenly did this sort of wiggle movement. And it just made me laugh almost. It seemed so weird. It was like a kind of end of session flourish as I was kind of bringing the tremoring to an end, which you can actually do by sort of tensing your muscles or adopting a different body position. But then the next time that I did tremoring on my own, I was doing the wiggling all the time. It's just the weirdest thing. And this time it seemed to be coming from lower down, from the belly or the sort of abdomen area, and it would trigger it. And then I'd start doing a wiggle. And I noticed that it was alternating between leg tremoring and wiggling. And I have to stress that during all this time, when I tremor on my own, when I do TRE on my own, I never do it for more than 15 minutes. In fact, usually I do it for 10 or 11 minutes. But despite that, sometimes I just feel totally drained afterwards. And the really strange thing is that I can never tell whether I'm going to feel drained or not. There was one time when I was doing this sort of wiggling thing, or when the wiggling was happening, and it was really, really vigorous. So I was alternately wiggling or my legs were tremoring, but it was all happening really vigorously. And yet the next day, I felt full of energy. I didn't feel tired. And the day after that, I didn't feel tired. And I'd actually been planning a camping trip for ages. I'd wanted to do this camping and hiking trip because I love climbing hills. I'm obsessed with it. But I haven't been able to do as much recently because I've been so tired. So after this happened, I thought, great, my energy seems to be coming back. So I went ahead with the climbing trip. And the night before, I was nervous about it, which I often am when I'm doing camping, and I'm camping for a couple of days, a couple of nights. But this time I was super nervous, and I actually did not sleep a wink. And I don't remember any time when I've had that level of insomnia before. Usually I'll fall off to sleep at least at some point, maybe for an hour or two, if I've got insomnia, which is rare with me. So that night I did not sleep at all. And the next morning I actually cut back some of my plans because I thought I'm going to be so tired. And I travelled to the start of the walk by bus, and I had a 2.5 hour bus journey. I didn't even sleep on the bus journey. And then I walked for miles and miles for 10 hours, including one hill walk. I don't know how I kept going. I felt okay. I just felt kind of weary and down, but I didn't feel really lethargic. And then that night in my tent, I slept for 10.5 hours. And I just felt, looking back, that the TRE process had disrupted my sort of biorhythms in some way, but not in the way I expected. You just cannot predict what's going to happen with this process. And then when I got back, about 3 days after I got back from the camping trip, I had another session of shaking just on my own. And on this occasion, I was still doing that sort of wiggle, but it was much more subdued. It wasn't vigorous at all. And I thought, that's great. Maybe it's just going through the cycle and coming to the end of that cycle. But immediately after the session, I was exhausted. And I'd already recovered from the camping trip by this time. I'd had enough sleep before I did the TRE. And yet, after I did it, immediately I felt tired. And I was tired for 2 days afterwards. The next day, I could not get out of bed. I was so tired. So I'm just using that example to show that the vigorousness of the shaking doesn't seem to relate to how you're going to feel afterwards. The whole process seems to be quite unpredictable in my experience. I suppose it's a journey of discovery, really. And again, I want to emphasise that I didn't tremor for too long. I tend to tremor for about 10 to 12 minutes at a time, which isn't considered excessive. And yet after that session, after my camping trip, where it seemed quite subdued, the effects were so powerful. And it wasn't just my sleep that was affected. It wasn't just that I felt tired. At times I was staring blankly into space. It really felt that it had reconnected with some of the trauma from years ago. At one point I felt really nauseous. This was in the middle of the night. I woke up and there was no reason for it. I didn't have food poisoning or anything. I just felt really nauseous for about 3 hours, and then eventually it went away. But I just didn't feel myself for about a week after that. And funnily enough, I actually did some tremoring yesterday on my own, and I got up early this morning and felt fine, and I feel quite energetic today. One other effect that I had during that week was really bad forgetfulness. Forgetfulness like I haven't experienced before, and it was quite worrying, I forgot to attend an event that I've been looking forward to for months. And things like that. I just got mixed up with the dates. And you start to think, oh God, is my mind going? I've also had a few occasions where my body's just started tremoring slightly on its own, especially around the head area. So my head will just start to go from side to side or back and forth. The strange thing about TRE is that you really can't actually do the tremoring yourself. So I can't demonstrate what my head was doing. It just started sort of vibrating slightly, but I can't do it. It just happens or it doesn't happen. And you can't stop it. You don't have to tremor. You stop it by just tensing up. But I felt that my body wanted to do it. It's as if it's, as I said, it's as if it's realigning, readjusting. I think this area is quite significant for me. So I think it's a good thing if my head moves. What I have noticed is that it does seem to go in cycles, that the body will tremor from, triggered by a particular part of the body for a while. And during that time that's when I start to feel really raw. And then towards the end of that cycle, I start feeling tired. It's as if parts of me that have been hypervigilant or on alert for years, decades, are actually starting to relax. And that's why I get the exhaustion. At least that's what I hope is happening. But when you're in the middle of that cycle, you can feel emotionally raw, even jumpy, on edge. And also, when the tremoring's happening really vigorously, there's a temptation just to let your body keep going. But that is a really bad idea. I get that impression from the comments that I've seen on Reddit forums or other forums online. People who have allowed themselves to tremor for an hour and then they just were completely overwhelmed by trauma and the effects lasted for weeks. So it's really important just to do it for a short time and then to be patient with yourself to notice the effects. I'm very interested in IFS, internal family systems. The idea that we all have a multiplicity of parts that make up our personality. So one evening, not long after I'd started doing TRE, I started connecting with my parts as I lay in bed and just asking them how they felt about it. And the response was that they didn't like it at all. There were parts that felt very anxious and shook up by the whole process. They didn't know what was going to happen and they didn't think it was going to be good. So I tried to reassure them that I would pace myself and that I'd only do it for a few minutes each time. And they seemed to accept that. If you'd like to know more about parts, I did write a post about it and I'll put the link on the show notes in the show notes. So this has been a really strange couple of months. It's been a really strange couple of years, actually, because it's over the last couple of years that I've been doing various types of exposure on myself. It's a journey of discovery, as I keep saying. There's a book that I've got, a sort of comic book called Trauma is Really Strange. I just love that book. I love looking at the artistic depictions of the brain on trauma. And the only criticism I would have of it is that it doesn't go far enough to show how strange trauma can be, because it's such a strange process working with trauma. And I'd like to talk more about what led me to start doing trauma release exercises at this time. I'll discuss that in a future episode, and particularly why I wanted to work somatically with trauma held in the body. That in itself is really interesting, and I'll talk about that the next time.